Now, many of us are gripped by the Wagatha Christie case being heard in court, with footballer's wife Rebecca Vardy suing footballer's wife Colleen Rooney for libel. This might be wag-on-wag warfare, but what about internal political feuds in Westminster? I'm delighted to be joined by The Sun on Sunday's political editor, David Wooding, to go through some of his favourites. And we are going to start... Well, I'm going to start by welcoming you, David. It's nice to see you. And we would like to start with your one of your choices. We're going to start, though, with Blair and Brown. Why did you choose that one?
Well, this was the one that I lived through 25 years ago, since Tony Blair came to power in that wonderful day, May Day election, where we had the change of government for the first time in 18 years. But little did we all know at the time, apart from those who were really well connected, that there was a lot of friction between the new Prime Minister and his Chancellor, Gordon Brown, because they'd both apparently agreed a pact that Gordon Brown would take over the premiership after a year or two of Tony Blair. But of course, Tony Blair went on to win 3 elections, and the friction between the two got worse as time went on. And there were briefing wars galore. The little pub down the road just there, the Red Lion, we used to go in there for a drink knowing that we'd bump into one or other of the teams from either the Chancellor or Number 10 and be given all sorts of intriguing information about their opponent. And every time, of course, you asked about this officially, it was denied. But it was known locally as the TBGBs because of TB for Tony Blair and GB for Gordon Brown. I remember once, Gloria, going for lunch with a very senior political figure who was quite a big, influential person. I won't name who it was. And he agreed to meet me for breakfast at 8 in the morning. And when we sat down, I met him for the first time, shook his hand and said, "Hello, nice to meet you. How are you?" He said, "Awful," he said. "Gordon Brown is being beastly again." He didn't use the word beastly, he used something far more colourful. And he went straight into a tirade about Gordon Brown, which gave me a great story for that day's paper. So that shows you the level of feuding between the two sides at the side. Of course, they both went on to be a great pair, and Gordon Brown did become Prime Minister one day.
Also shows that sometimes, just occasionally, it is worth political journalists going for a breakfast at 8 o'clock in the morning. I avoided them like the plague. Sorry, David, I hope you can hear me. Right, we're now going to move over to the Conservatives. Geoffrey Howe and Margaret Thatcher. Tell us about that.
Yes, I mean, this was Geoffrey Howe was the Chancellor again. It was the Chancellor versus the Prime Minister, and again there was all friction between those two. I wasn't there at the time, but you remember Geoffrey Howe resigning and making that amazing speech in the Commons, which led to the beginning of the end of Margaret Thatcher. And of course, she has her own feud, of course, with Ted Heath, who managed to sulk from the backbenches for many, many years, attacking her, and it became known as the longest sulk in political history. So again, like Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, Margaret Thatcher had her detractors, and she managed to survive and win 3 general elections as well. So perhaps, Gloria, a feud isn't such a bad thing. Perhaps it inspires leaders to go on to greater things.
Well, you say a feud is no bad thing, but I was in Parliament when the Liband brothers. Tell us why you've chosen that one. I voted for David, by the way. Didn't work.
You're coming through very faintly here, Gloria, I'm afraid.
The Miliband brothers, which I had the pleasure of serving in Parliament during that one.
The Milibands, well, of course, they were... I mean, that was a peculiar one. It was one we didn't write about a lot. We knew there was a lot of friction or rivalry between these two brothers. It was never spoken about. They were both special advisors in their own departments. Ed Miliband, of course, in Gordon Brown's camp, and David Miliband more clearly in Tony Blair's camp. And that probably, the feud between the Prime Minister and the Chancellor probably led to a feud between the SPADs, the Special Advisers, and in this case between two Special Advisers who happened to be brothers as well. They were both seen as, they both got into the cabinet. David Miliband becoming Education Secretary and Ed Miliband was Climate Change and Energy Secretary. And the feuding went on a little bit behind the scenes again there. Again, it was all very much kept under the surface, but it all came to a head when it came to the leadership election. And Ed Miliband, in fact, pipped his big brother for the job and snatched the crown off his head because David Miliband was seen as the successor for the Labour Party crown and didn't get it. Of course, he's now left the country, and I think their rivalry, the sibling rivalry and political rivalry merged together in a toxic mix, caused a lot of upset inside the family.
And one other that you chose is taking us a little bit further back in history, so you can teach me and all the viewers about this too. Bevin and Herbert Morrison.
Yes, even I wasn't born then, Gloria, but it was in the 1930s when Clement Attlee was re-elected as interim leader of the Labour Party, which had run through a difficult time with an extremely left-wing leader before. And Ernest Bevin was backing Clem Attlee along and had a big rivalry with other members of the party. One of them was Herbert Morrison, in fact, the grandfather of Peter Mandelson, who became a major figure in New Labour. And when he backed Herbert Morrison, when he effectively knifed Herbert Morrison and gave the crown to Clem Attlee, Herbert Morrison was heard to say, "I think sometimes I'm my own worst enemy," to which Ernie Bevin replied, "Not while I'm still alive, you're not."
Good one. Finally, I've picked one that you didn't pick. So I'm going to put you on the spot on this one, but I just wanted to show that actually politics isn't just about men fighting. One feud that nearly did end up in the courts, but didn't, Emily Thornberry and Caroline Flint.
Who and Caroline Flint? Sorry, the line's really bad here.
Emily Thornberry and Caroline Flint had quite a spat over Brexit.
Oh, yes. Yes, Brexit. Now, of course, Brexit was the fuel, the rocket fuel for all feuds. I mean, being in that place over the road for the last 6 years has been incredible. Feuds galore, even within the Conservative Party. You talk about the Labour Party. The Labour Party had it less than the Conservative Party because there were more on the Brexit side. But you did get a sizable rump of people in the Labour Party, Caroline Flint being one of them, and Kate Howe and others who were all pro-Brexit. Sometimes these people were exercised by their own constituency and representing what their own voters wanted. But of course the Labour Party was very clearly behind Remain, and that did lead to some nasty going-ons there and briefings against people. Yes, definitely.
I've got the scars on my back, David. Great fun. Thank you for the history lesson. Come back and talk to us again soon.
Pleasure.
Thank you, David Wooding, political editor of The Sun on Sunday.